If you're watching this on YouTube and aren't subscribed and want to make sure you stay up to date on the latest in diesel truck news and trends, make sure and click the subscribe button, like, comment, let us know what you think about the episode. If there's a particular guest or topic that you'd like to hear about, I'd love to take your comments, questions, suggestions, and be able to get them on the future episodes. Today I'm going to be chatting with Rislone, and I wanted to talk with them about diesel fuel and what ways and things we can do to avoid fuel system damage, make sure that we're getting the highest quality fuel into the to the injector, into the cylinder as possible. They got a few different products. I wanted to ask more questions about it and look forward to chatting with them today. Before we get to it, I want to give a shout out to one of our sponsors that helps make the Diesel Podcast possible. Kershaw Knives has a 40% off MSRP code for you. If you go to kershaw.kaiusa.com and use code 25TDP40, get you 40% off MSRP. It's a great way to save some money, get some cool gear if you're in the market for a new EDC knife, something for hunting, fishing, around the job site, around the house. They've got a whole lineup designed to meet any budget, and there's tons of different choices for blade steel, blade shape, different handle designs, different opening mechanisms. So we appreciate them offering that discount code just for Diesel Podcast listeners. All right, let's get to today's podcast with Rislone and talking about diesel fuel, ways we can condition it, cetane, anti-gel, tons of different topics. Clay and Eric, welcome back to the Diesel Podcast. Looking forward to chatting with you guys today about it's a really cool product that I know now because of the temperatures out there, but kind of a year-round issue that diesel truck owners are going to face is the condition of fuel, what we get at the pump, how it can affect our injection pumps, injectors, lots of different things. So I look forward to asking you guys some questions today and learning more. So welcome back to the podcast.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks for having us back.
Yeah, thank you.
I think we should start maybe kind of at the beginning of what diesel fuel is. I think most of us know it's changed over the years, and we're on ultra low sulfur diesel. But to help educate us, if somebody's new to diesel, doesn't know, they're kind of used to the gas world where you just pick the octane rating that you want when you go to the pump. Why is diesel fuel different, or what sort of issues can it have just inherently as a fuel?
Well, good one for us older people. Just talk about gasoline for a moment. Back when they had leaded gasoline, so that basically went away in the United States around the 70s, and there was lubrication with the lead in the gas, and it helped with the octane rating of the gas. So diesel parallels that a little bit, but with the sulfur. And used to be higher sulfur content was the normal for diesel fuel up until around 2005 or so. And that sulfur was a lubricant and did a really good job of lubricating in those systems. It didn't in itself really help with cetane or the power that you get out of the diesel fuel, but the process at the refineries to remove that sulfur, part of that process unintentionally actually takes away some of the performance parts of a diesel fuel, so you actually are getting less power out of the fuel because of that ultra low sulfur diesel that we have here.
Was as far as it's switching over, I imagine there's a lot of issues people have faced over the years between older diesel trucks that were designed to run on that fuel, and then when it switched over to ultra low sulfur, there's probably through the years maybe complaints or issues with injection pumps or just different things that can pop up. So whether you have an old truck or a new truck, you're still facing kind of the same issue of the condition of the fuel, the dryness, I guess, if I used air quotes to kind of put around it, that that you can face as a truck owner.
Yeah, for sure. And though a lot of those older diesels aren't on the road today or aren't driven like that they used to be, but that lubrication, the pumps, there was large problems with pumps. There's still a lot of problems with pumps today too that can have benefit of adding some lubricant to those fuels. And we produce a couple of products. There's a lot of companies that are producing similar type products that add lubricity to the diesel fuel, which is a huge benefit for older diesels, but it can even be a benefit for the newer diesels.
I know on some other conversations we've had, Clay, you've talked to us about the diesel fuel that's in Europe versus the United States. And from my limited knowledge, of how diesel fuel is produced and sold in the United States, there's a minimum standard of different criteria that it has to meet. Does it vary greatly from Europe, or do they have this need for additives and lubricants and all these different things that we do here? Or how do they stack up against each other as far as quality of the fuel?
The not only just the U.S. and Europe, but Central America, South America, a lot of the other markets, there's still what we would call our old diesel being sold in those markets. So it would be a high sulfur diesel. Now that's causing them some issues with some of the newer diesels because of the emission system. So there's been looking at products for specific markets because of what their diesel actually is. But I would say our U.S. fuel is comparable to Europe. Europe has far more diesels than we have here. I mean, it was certainly some electrification happening over there, but 50+% of just the normal everyday vehicles, passenger cars, small SUVs over there are diesel. Partly because the diesel fuel is less in price over there, a little bit opposite compared to here, where it's actually higher. Partly because of the way they tax the fuel there, and then just the fuel economy that you actually get out of the diesel compared to gasoline or petrol over there.
Is there a
Yeah,
big? Oh, go ahead, Eric.
I was just going to say we've seen some. It's not, it's not very, I guess, common as of yet, but we've seen some manufacturers are actually looking into a secondary tank that holds a fuel additive that will pretty much consistently be spraying that into the actual fuel as it's going into the system. So it'll be interesting to see how some of that develops, especially in Europe over the next few years.
Would you guys say the issue with fuel is kind of twofold in the sense of the sulfur and it being removed from the fuel is driven by emissions and emission standards and those changing? Is it also the quality or the variance that you could see at the pump from one station to the next as to, and maybe one's a little bit better one day, one a couple blocks away, it might vary. It still meets that minimum, but it might be a little bit more dry or not have the cetane in it, or how much variance is out there that can really affect your truck from fill up to fill up?
I think in general, if you're getting it at a station that sells a bit of diesel, you're not going to have much of an issue. If you're out in a rural area or you're traveling and you hit a station that has one diesel pump and they just don't do much volume of it, you could have a little bit of an issue, and we've heard about issues with those. Probably this time of year, the biggest thing would be there is stations for us people up in the northern area, which has a lot of cold, though this month I know it's even got down to Florida and Louisiana and a lot of other places. So here the normal is you're going to buy winter diesel that is additivized right out of the tank, which is definitely, they put a minimum amount for the most part, but it's definitely better than a station that doesn't do that at all. And there's some that that happens. Probably the more we hear about issues is somebody filling up down south where it's definitely doesn't have any of the additives, usually in the bigger trucks, and then they're heading north, and then they start getting gelling or other issues related to not having any of those additives when they hit the cold.
Yeah, I'd say it's around probably like November, December. We start to get listeners that want to hear podcasts about fuel gelling up, and it seems it's kind of every winter. But another topic that's really driven it, I think, has been the CP4s that are on some of the diesel engines out there and some of the wear. So people want to be proactive. They want to avoid having to replace their CP4 pump or maybe even injectors and that huge bill that comes with that. So they're looking to be proactive, and you guys have some products that you manufacture that I wanted to learn more about and chat with you guys about. So what could I do as a truck owner to be able to protect my fuel system and get some of those benefits of lubricity and increased cetane and some of the other things that are out there?
You mentioned the cold, and I'll just hit on that one just real quick because it seems like for a lot of the diesel owners we talk to, that's about the only time of year they're thinking about additives is that November heading into winter. Yeah. And that I don't want to have any frozen lines or having it gelling up. But yeah, there's a lot of other additives out there that can be benefits. For one would be you do get a little bit of some poor fuel that's got a lower cetane rating. There is additives out there that will boost that cetane rating, so that you can use up that fuel until you get you can top it off or fill it up with some better quality fuel. But then to the lubrication piece, again, I had mentioned it before. That's a huge issue with older, but also newer, and there's benefits not only for the pump lubricating the injectors, the upper cylinder lubricant where you are lubricating that upper ring in the top part of the piston. So yeah, there's additives out there that will help with that. We have a couple things. We have one, it's our Hyper Diesel Complete Fuel System Cleaner that has a conditioner and treatment in it. It's really unique. We recommend you use it about every 5,000 miles for this particular product, but it has a little bit of all the additives that you're actually going to find on the shelf for your vehicle. It has a upper cylinder lubricant, which again lubricates that pump. It has a water remover, prevents that gelling, lowers the cold filter plug point. It has an upper cylinder cleaner, combustion chamber cleaner. It's got the injector cleaner, cetane booster, everything all right in that one product. And then sort of in between that, we do have a injector cleaner that's an upper cylinder lubricant. Comes in a couple different sizes, but that's the one that we recommend in between using this one, just to keep that lubrication in your fuel that doesn't have today.
So there's a couple different ways I could stay on that 5,000 mile schedule, but then in between be able to condition the fuel and be able to, I guess, eliminate deposits, things that can just happen in that 5,000 mile span. So it is kind of a year-round maintenance schedule I could follow.
Correct.
With as far as this topic, one of the reasons it really interests me is because it bridges older trucks with newer trucks, which tend to be separated a lot, I think, because of the emissions components. But whether you have a 1994 Dodge or a 2025, 2024 Power Stroke, you're going to basically face the same issue of fuel quality, specifically as we look at newer trucks or ones with DPFs and EGRs and using an additive product with it. I've seen questions that we've gotten before where people will say, is it safe to use on my emissions intact diesel truck? So looking kind of at the R&D, the testing that you guys do, what goes into it, and what should somebody know about using it on an emissions intact DPF EGR equipped truck?
From our product development side, we do a lot of internal testing ourselves, but we do typically also send it out for testing with like an actual ASTM test method. That way we can actually publish the numbers. And then I think we touched on it briefly last time, but we do send all this information to the EPA. So they kind of check over formulas and look at what this product is, how much you're planning to kind of have out on the market. And then they can give a stamp of approval for us to put on there. And if we do get anything like that, we typically put it right on directly on the package, just to understand that, the same people that are creating these emission standards and what an emission system should look like are giving approval for our product specifically when we go to launch a new one.
Yeah, I think that's...
Yeah, and part of that, I'll just add, is there's two pieces. One is that it's effective. It's going to meet the claims and do what we say. And then the other side, which is just as important, is the no harm. We want to do no harm to any of these vehicles. So it's making sure that any of these additives that we put in there aren't going to harm the engine or, as you were talking, the newer emission system. So yeah, an easy one would be, we add some sulfur to it, but it's not going to be EPA certified or registered, and then we're just going to be causing issues. We solve one thing, but then now all of a sudden we're plugging up a DPF or something that because it has that sulfur in there.
Yeah, that's the kind of big question that I think people ask is they say, okay, well, I'm going to get these increased benefits, but what is it going to do to my DPF, if anything? And we've talked about it before on some of our conversations, is like cleaning the DPF and how emissions and engine performance are all tied together. So I think that helps people understand the testing and building it around a framework to protect the integrity of these other components that are on a truck. And I think for the people that have older ones, that's something that they struggle with as well. These trucks that were designed to operate on a different kind of fuel, and them wanting to basically do the same thing, make sure their injection pumps, fuel systems are all maintained or are able to have the lubricity that it needs to avoid wear. And so that's one reason this topic is really interesting to me, is how it bridges the old and the new, and just how important it is. And I think sometimes we forget that when you guys are out there and you're talking with clients, customers, going to trade shows, things like that. Are there some questions, maybe common questions, that people ask you guys when it comes to an additive, whether it's very technical or maybe more general, or what do you guys hear out there?
The one that comes to mind first for me is does this stuff really work? I mean, that's the number one question I've been asked at trade shows, whether it's for a customer or it's a national type trade show. And well, I might be biased, but yes, when we have data that backs this up, and for all these claims that we make, whether it's like Eric mentioned, an ASTM test, or Cummins might have some tests. There's other people out there that have some different tests. It's making sure that we're meeting those tests. Most of the time working to exceed the results of those tests. Eric, I know you just came back from a trade show. What were you hearing?
Yeah, I think in general, the number one thing that I hear quite a bit is, on like the one product, the hyperfuel product that Clay was talking about, we claim, we can increase your cetane 1 to 2 points, or fuel economy, we can increase up to like 7%, with regular use of our products. People say, well, if I put in double or triple, will I get that 3 times as much? And it's like, no. We formulate these very specifically for a certain amount of fuel, and doubling down on our products is definitely not going to give you a better result. So I think that's a pretty common one. People want to know, how, if I want to get an 8-point cetane increase, can I just use 4 or 5 of your bottles? Is like, no, absolutely, please do not. We're very specifically dosed for this product in this amount of fuel, or gallons of fuel. So.
What goes into that dosing recommendation? I think it's kind of a big topic, but what you guys were just mentioning there, I think of, sometimes people think, well, if a little is good, a lot is better. But how it factors into basically a safe dose, something that's good for the emission system, something that with data you guys can back up. Because I imagine if you take just fuel from a fuel station, you can get the technical data on the lubricity, the cetane, all the different things, and then you compare it to a treated fuel, it's different. And so to me, the question of does it work? Well, I could look at the data and see the difference in it. But what goes into dosing it correctly for so much variance that's out there, whether it's fuel from station to station, winter blend versus non-winter blend, all those sorts of things. People really get curious about, I think, the manufacturing and the R&D side of it, how it pertains to what they actually get in the bottle.
Yeah, you mentioned from station to station or regional. There's a lot of different fuels, but the other thing is just think about what's the average person do for their vehicle when they say they're going to fill it up. Are they running it down to E? Are they running it down to quarter? Do they just half? Do they totally fill it up? Diesel is a little bit different than we run into with gasoline, because we see a lot of consumers that that they're putting $20 in, let's say, to get them by for a few days until they can get a little more money to put some more gasoline or diesel into their vehicle. So I'm just mentioning that because we have to take all of those things into account with, okay, what is the consumer doing? When we talked about filling up, or you're going to the gas station, just because you would fill it up until it clicks off and then maybe add it a little bit more, you want it to be totally full. Yeah, that next person that's using our products isn't necessarily doing that, or are they running it down to empty? So all of those things come into consideration. So yeah, when we're looking at the claims that we make or the dosage recommendation, so we're looking at the amount of fuel that the product's going to go into. So as an example, that bottle we were talking about, the hyper diesel product that's every 5,000 miles, that one we've targeted 35 gallons. So I mean, our target customer with that product is your F-250 or your Duramax, GM, Cummins, Ram. I mean, that's our target person with that particular one. But yeah, you can use half a bottle for smaller SUV type vehicles, or we have dosage on there that you're using more for your heavy duty type customers. But again, we just targeted that one for that 35 gallons in this particular case. But even with that, there's a range there. We know, okay, yeah, what if they do only have 20, and then, is it going to cause any issue, or what's the effectiveness? If it is, somebody's put a larger tank on their truck and it's 40, 45 gallons, are we still going to get some effectiveness out of it? So we take a look at pretty much all that information.
Common question we get from you guys a lot is, hey, I need a diesel engine. I either, I can't wait this long to get one, or normal place I get stuff from it just takes too long, or they don't have the parts in it that I need. Maybe my truck's not stock, or I tow heavy with it. I don't want to go back with just a stock engine. DFC Diesel is a sponsor of the podcast. We worked with them, hand in hand on doing episodes, answering technical questions. They have a complete lineup of Cummins, Duramax, and Powerstroke remanufactured engines that are set to a standard of ISO 9001 2015 standards, which is a huge deal in the aftermarket. And there's certain levels of quality testing, validation that are required for that. So when you get one of those engines, the type of quality that's built behind it with an industry-leading warranty that's really comprehensive. And the other thing with that is, sometimes the options that are out there, it's a basic OEM engine. You want a little bit more. You don't want to have the same failure again. So there's a bunch of different series of engines that they have, from core, street, tow haul, and also the Speed of Air series, which we've covered on the podcast before. There's a lot of really cool benefits to it. And if you have questions about that, reach out to them. If you don't know the type of engine that you're looking for, if you go to dfcdiesel.com, there's a ton of info there. You can send an email or you can reach out to them. Also, they're working with Speed of Air pistons, which it's the only piston that pays for itself. And there's a lot of really cool technology behind it. So you can add that into your build and be able to get better fuel economy, increase power, increase torque, and better engine life out of it. Some of the most common engine applications or series of engines that they have with that lead time, a lot of them are in stock or they have really short lead times. So you can check your favorite retailer or go to dfcdiesel.com, check them out, see what's in stock, see what you can get. If you have questions, maybe you want to do something that's outside of the normal series of engines, they have tons of choices for rods, cranks, pistons, valve train upgrades, tons of different things. So if you're in the market, definitely make sure and head on over and check them out. When it comes to things like deposits and cleaning, that's another part of this that I'm really curious about. And I think back to maybe some engine teardowns that I've seen in the past. And I think of one where the guy was building a race engine, but he took it all apart and everything looked fantastic and he credited his fuel additive. And then you see another engine where it's just, there's all these deposits, everything just looks, really kind of horrible. What is the benefit to keeping a clean fuel system? Like I can think generally, yeah, I want a clean fuel system, but I'm sure there's downsides, whether it's maybe with injector spray pattern or wear or other things. But what specifically can happen when you let deposits build up in a diesel engine?
Well, two of the kind of big ones that are, most outright noticeable is just fuel economy. So like you mentioned, the spray pattern, or if it's just dirty and it's not getting enough in there, your fuel economy is going to suffer. And that's where we say on this product, an average of about 7% increase is what we claim based on our testing. But then just power loss, you're not going to complete, burn. You're get all that buildup in there, and then your power coming out of that engine is just going to be greatly reduced. So between your actual fuel economy you're noticing, and then just the amount of power, whether you're towing something or not, those are two things that would be certainly noticeable.
Do you guys notice more issues with deposits on newer emissions equipped trucks versus the older ones, or are they about the same?
With EGR, so if you think about pre-EGR, things were definitely cleaner. You're recirculating that exhaust back through and being reburnt. So especially if you have an engine that's not running as efficiently, maybe you're burning a little bit of oil, or you have a dirty injector in one of the cylinders. Yeah, that stuff's coming right back through into being reburnt. And so yeah, EGR engines definitely have more deposits than the older ones.
I was just thinking of another question. A bunch of them have happened, especially over the last couple of weeks with the cold snap that's kind of gone everywhere. But somebody gets their fuel starts to gel, and I think it's just kind of natural that people think, well, now I need to use a fuel additive, like you guys had mentioned. If they already have a truck that's gelled up, will this product, is it something that they could put into their tank to be able to get it started and running, or is the damage been done? They just got to let it thaw and then kind of get on a schedule of using this all the time to avoid that situation? Or how does it work in an emergency situation? It's, 2 degrees outside. It just froze up for the first time.
It depends if it's still running or able to run. If it's to the point that it's gelled up and it's not able to run, there are some products out there where you maybe spin off the fuel filter and you're pouring the product in there and trying to work to get it to thaw out. But it can be exceptionally difficult. Where you either having it towed to put inside of a heated building to get it thawed out, or I've seen people even, we hear about some of our DIY customers that they've got torpedo heaters or something where they're trying to put some heat underneath the vehicle and cover it up to heat it up. But depending on the outside temperature, it can be extremely difficult.
Yeah.
By far your best bet is to make sure you're using this when it starts to get down below freezing to prevent those things from happening.
So it would be something that I could use this year round. So I don't have to run 2 different ones or run one in the winter, one in the summer. It's just simple. I can just use this throughout the whole year, and it basically addresses all those issues regardless of the temperature of the season. It's just one product.
Yep. Yeah, that product that we've been mainly talking about, yes, using it all year round. Like I mentioned, we got a little bit of all these different additives that there's benefits. Certainly sometimes it's a little bit more of a benefit at certain times of the year as far as the water remover or the gel, anti-gel properties. But I mentioned water remover. Yeah, if you've got a lot of rain or you're in a humid environment, there's benefits for that all year round. You can, if you can keep that water where it's getting going out to be burned, because all fuel is going to end up with a little bit of moisture in it, whether it's pumped because it's in the tank, and I'm talking about the tank at the fuel station, and you're pumping it into your vehicle, or just from moisture in your air getting into it.
Yeah, and our hyperfuel product, we've gotten great feedback from people. It works really well. It's just a fuel stabilizer in storage, so if you're, sitting on a couple cans of fuel, this one works great to help with oxidation and things like that. And like Clay mentioned, the gelling and some of the other issues you can have. So keep that in mind as well.
I think that's a big one for a lot of our listeners who either work in agriculture or other type of industries where they have large, diesel fuel storage, and
Yep.
they want to keep it as fresh as possible, kind of like what we talked about with the DEF fluid, and
Yep.
kind of how that could crystallize and all those sorts of things. So I'm seeing how all this is related. It's just like one. It all comes back to itself.
Yep.
And this next question, this one's kind of tough, and I'm not asking it to name other companies or anything like that, but I'm thinking as a consumer and as a truck owner. So I've listened to this podcast, I've listened to others, I've watched YouTube videos, I've done reading. I know I need to use a fuel additive. And I look out there and maybe there's 20, 30, maybe there's 500 products that are out there. What sort of questions do I need to ask myself to pick the right fuel additive? Should I look at what the data shows? Should I look at claims? Should I look at what it addresses? What would you advise that I look to and ask and get the answer to before I choose a fuel additive?
From my side, knowing on the backside of developing these chemicals, seeing what the ingredients are, testing a lot of competitors' products, and I wouldn't name any names. There's a lot of good stuff out there. There's a lot of stuff out there. You're just better off using the fuel and not even putting that in. The one place I'll mention is that, let's say it says it's an injector cleaner or that type of a product. What companies will do, they'll make that claim, but they only put enough additive in there to keep it clean. So if it's dirty, it's not going to clean anything. It's just enough additive in there, like I say, to keep it clean, which is usually what most fuels that you're buying too. When fuels go to a terminal, there's no additives in there. So what happens is, in general, they're going to be put in a truck to be transported to a fuel station. Depending on what brand that fuel station is, they put in certain additives at that time. It's loaded in the fuel truck, taken to the station. So, but those in general additives are enough to keep clean if it's a good quality station. In some stations, they don't even put much of anything in there. So the bigger picture, it's a hard one to answer. Knowing that it's a name brand product usually helps, but then again, I know some name brand products out there that are lower end. One plan would be if the price is very low and it seems hard to believe that it's going to do anything, there's probably a chance that that's true. Eric, you got anything to add?
Mine was going to be price point as a consumer. This is one of those things, knowing the kind of the front end of all this and just, the price of all the different pieces going into some of these formulas. Not saying you want to pay top dollar, but paying a couple bucks now for a additive like ours, is going to save you a lot down the road if you really starting to run into some of these issues.
And I just had one other thought. In a lot of things, if they're super concentrated, in other areas I've seen where sometimes it gets hard to believe, but in fuel additives, that's not necessarily the case, because you would be shocked at how much a certain amount of a fuel additive, how many gallons that can treat. So I just say that because there's some products out there, you might buy a 16 to 32 ounce bottle and it says it can treat 100 to 250 gallons. And you're like, how can one bottle do that? But in reality, that is true. It certainly can do that.
I kind of think back to the performance side as almost an analogy. Like, you get a diesel truck, you're going to put a tune on it, and you're looking out there for what's available, and one will say, well, it makes 180 horsepower. You can do that. You can add 180 horsepower, but it's at 2,800 RPM. And another one does 140, but that's at a lower RPM, or where more of your driving would be done. And someone who isn't very familiar with this, which I'm not, and I imagine a lot of truck owners are, we just don't know what to ask. We just see like what's on the label, what's on the website, what we see on the banner, and we see this huge cetane boost number, and we think, well, that's better, or some of these other things. We just don't know what to ask, and I think trying to weed through that and discover, what's really important, what do I need to focus on, to get the best product can really be tough, because we don't have the knowledge that you guys do, and don't know the testing and the formulations and things like that. So it helps to understand that side when we go to make a purchasing decision. And then I think moving forward, at least for myself, and maybe some other people out there, once I find a product I like, I just run it forever. Some of them I've used for 10 plus years. I just stick with what I know, what works. And so we want to make that kind of long-term decision. But I think the thing is, not running any additive is probably the worst thing. Would you guys agree with that? Just trusting the fuel that comes out of the pump?
Again, might be a little bit biased. Okay, I am biased, but yeah, absolutely. Especially with diesel. I mean, there's some benefits to gasoline too, certain times a year, or depending on the vehicle, if it's turbocharged or not. But for the diesel side, every tank, if you're running that tank through, or running it down to empty and then totally filling it up, most likely you should be using something in that tank.
Yeah, it was when I first started working here years and years ago. One of the things that took me by surprise was how many people that work for this company use our products like that. So that was a pretty reassuring thing to see too.
I think one of the things I overlooked as a diesel truck owner for a long time was I didn't think additives worked. I thought it was just something to spend money on that I didn't really need. But through the years, talking with people like yourself and learning and just trying to absorb information, it's really critical. I think especially with trucks now, all the technology that's in them, the emission systems, or an older truck, it really is a key part of, I think, ongoing maintenance. And the CP4 issues is one that kind of jumps out to me that I'd like to stay on top of because of the expenses. I think we're all trying to limit unnecessary expenses when it comes to maintaining a vehicle. And to me, an additive is cheap insurance, for that. Do you guys find that can kind of, do you guys see that in the marketplace as well with diesel truck owners, that it's just they haven't really thought about it, or they only think about it when there's an issue, and then that's kind of when it happens. That's when light bulb goes off.
You could almost think about it as a vitamin with certain additives that if they're doing the job, you don't necessarily see anything. But the benefit is if you weren't using them, that's when you're seeing an issue. You're getting those deposits that build up. I mean, these deposits, just as far as the cleaner portion, are exceptionally hard. So you get that on the upper ring or up to the top of the piston. I mean, it can really scratch and do some damage to the cylinder wall. So, I mean, that's just one example. Besides just even say your vehicle's losing performance, a lot of people don't even really notice it because it's so gradual. It just doesn't, until maybe you get in somebody else's vehicle, or you get in a new vehicle or a newer vehicle. Wow, this thing runs so much better than mine. Well, it may not. It's because of some issues. Your injectors are a little bit dirty, so it's not a good pattern spraying in there, and you're getting more droplets. So yeah, it's not your fuel economy has gone down, but it's gradual enough. Us as humans don't necessarily notice it.
I thought of another question to ask you guys right now. It just came to me right now. Is it ever too late to start using additives? Say I've got 300,000 miles on my truck. I've never used additives. I don't know what the deposits look like in there. I don't know how dirty the fuel system is. The engine's never been apart. Is there any hesitation that I should have to clean it out, or what's your opinion on a higher mileage truck that's never run anything, kind of condition unknown with the cleanliness, like inside the piston and the head itself?
No, I don't think you'd ever be too late to start. Obviously, if you have some large mechanical issue, there's nothing we're going to be able to do for that. Unless we come up with that product, then we'll be doing real good. But no, I'd say, from the onset, if you got that scenario, you're in an older vehicle, and there's in my opinion, no time too late to start using one.
Yeah, especially for the fuel additives. There's other systems that myself and from talking to people and seeing and hearing stories, like say a transmission, and you bought a vehicle, it's never had the transmission fluid changed, it's got a lot of miles on it. I've heard horror stories. People go ahead and change that fluid, and then they start having problems because dirt stuff gets broken loose in there. But as far as the fuel additives, we haven't really seen anything. It's not like it's going to break this stuff off in chunks. It's dissolving things very, very gradual. So yeah, I haven't seen a bad time to ever start using fuel additives like this.
I'm glad you mentioned that, Clay, because that's the exact example that I've heard about a transmission. Never been serviced. You service it, now it doesn't work, and that might be the only experience that we've heard about or had with a vehicle or a truck, and then it almost translates over to, well, should I do a fuel additive, or is that going to be the same thing? Is it going to clean out all these deposits, and now I have issues? So I wanted to ask that because I've seen that question before with some of our listeners.
Only other one that I've heard sort of like that, there's some oil flush type products out there, and the only time personally I think that those might be something that I would use or somebody should use, absolutely last resort. You're already having oil pressure fluctuations or that, because I've heard some of the same things on that too. You weren't sure about the vehicle, so you ran a product like that. It breaks up some stuff and it ends up in the screen for the oil pump. So that's probably the only other scenario I've ever heard about.
There's not a lot of products, maintenance products, or definitely on the performance side. There's not a lot of them where you can run them from brand new to 500,000 miles. You could run it on a 2001 or a 2024 and still get the benefit out of it or have the need for it. But I've become really in tune with just fuel quality and the fuel systems. And I think because I've heard from so many people over the years of CP4 failures, and they have this huge repair bill, and maybe they can't even get the parts because they're a national back order, or they can't get it aftermarket because there's a long wait. And it's become just such a sensitive issue that it can be preventable in some ways, I think, with a fuel additive. And being able to just avoid that huge bill. So I think that's why it resonates with people, that, you know, a topic like this, a product like this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, for people who want to learn more, maybe they have questions for you guys. They don't know, you know, which of the products to go with. What's the best way to find that information and then like find it out kind of in the wild, so to speak, through retailers, through different places? How can they find the product and ask questions about it?
Well, for starters, I mean, I know we talked about it a little bit last time, but we have a great tech support team that's sitting right up here in Michigan. They know all about our products. And I think, if you're looking for kind of a schedule of something that you should do, you can give them a call, drop them an email, and they'll be able to kind of give you a timeline of what you should be using and how often. And that way you can kind of come up with a unique program just for your specific issues. On our website, we do have a lot of good general information up there on just, we pretty much always call out, exactly when a product should be used, how often, how to use it. And so I'd say, between those two is a good way to get some information. But, these products have been around so long that, even some of the bigger, big box automotive stores, they're very familiar with our products too. So, a lot of them can be very, very helpful as store associates or managers over there. So yeah, doing a little bit of research. And like I said, our tech support team is great and they can pretty much kind of come up with a custom program for any of your listeners.
There is a store locator on our website too. But like the one product that we were talking about, our Rislone, this bottle, it's actually a neat dual cavity bottle too. So if you see it, it's something that looks different on the shelf. We partly did that to show the consumers that there is multiple additives inside that bottle, because sometimes there is a little bit of believability issues with that. We did also put a patented spout on the bottle. So for the later model diesels that have misfueling devices, which they're starting to come out with a little bit more in the U.S., very popular in Europe and some of the other markets, it has to be that size of a diesel nozzle to be able to pour in any type of fuel additive, and we have that on this particular product. But you can get it at the Walmart.com, the Amazon, as far as ordering it online, like the Love's truck stops. They have this particular product too.
It's been really interesting with some of our other topics we've covered, whether it was the DEF system or the DPF. Is I'll see comments on YouTube or sometimes on social media or emails. People say, well, where can I find it? And so I always like to ask you guys, what's the best place to find it? And then I really love when somebody will say, hey, I used it and it fixed my issue, or I noticed a difference, which that's what people really want. They want to know that it works, and there's no better way than a random person, I don't know them, who's on YouTube or Instagram or TikTok or something like that talks about it. And I think fuel additives is a huge one. And, it applies towards those older trucks as well. So even though they don't have a DF or DPF like some of the other topics we've covered, this is going to apply to them as well. So I appreciate you guys taking time with me today to shed some light on fuel additives, how to be able to maintain these trucks regardless of temperature and the season. And I encourage people to check out your website, give you guys a call with any questions. And as always, it was fantastic to chat with you guys.
Yep, great to be here. Thank you very much.
Yep, you as well. Thank you.
Don't forget, diesel fans, make sure and head on over to kershaw.kaiusa.com. Use code 25TDP40. Get your 40% off MSRP. Great way to save some money, get some cool gear if you're in the market for an EDC knife, something for hunting, fishing, around the job site, around the house. They've got you covered with a whole lineup of different knives to meet any budget. And there's tons of choices for blade steel, blade shape, handle design, different opening mechanisms. And so we appreciate them offering that discount code just for Diesel Podcast listeners. Also want to give a shout out to some of our Patreon supporters, Tyler Loewen of 23 Diesel, CUTTERUP Rob, Robert, all of our other Patreon supporters, all of you who subscribe on YouTube and podcast apps, follow us on social media. We appreciate all your support here in year 9 of the Diesel Podcast and look forward to bringing you more of the content that you want to hear in 2025. Till next time, keep the shiny side up.